Hey fellow foodies, today's soup is a creamy poblano soup. It is adapted from Joanna. We're starting with poblano peppers, some celery, yellow onion, carrots, garlic, cumin and thyme. I made some pico de gallo for garnish, which is optional. The heavy cream, salt and pepper, and a cup of milk. And we'll talk more about these ingredients as we go. So, without further ado, let's get started with our stick of butter. And chicken broth. So we're going to melt our butter in our soup pot. Now, could you use olive oil or vegetable oil or anything plant-based? I mean, you could, but I think the reason that we're using the butter is that these veggies cook for about 15 minutes. So 15 to 20 minutes. So they're basically being pan roasted. I don't know how it would turn out if you didn't use butter. So I should add, this is not a vegetarian or it's not a vegan or vegetarian soup, but you could probably adapt it and make it that way. But again, I can't really vouch for how it will taste. So I'm adding all my veggies, and yes, we are going to basically saute them for about 15 minutes before we even add the spices. And I believe that helps not only the veggies kind of sort of caramelize, but mainly it softens up that poblano pepper for blending. And that's the other thing too. I put all of these ingredients in my food processor to kind of chop them up to save time and energy, because ultimately they are going to be blended, so they don't have to be perfect. And I did cheat and use some shredded carrots. I didn't even put the carrots in the food processor. So this doesn't have to be very labor intensive, which, you know, if you weren't going to put it in the blender, it kind of would be, because there's a lot of veggies to chop here. So now I'm just going to let it simmer and stir consistently for the 15 minutes. Now that my veggies have been cooking in the butter and kind of pan roasting, now's the time to add the addition of the spices. And again, you want to just make sure that you're stirring and nothing sticking to the bottom of the pot. So here is the salt and pepper added. Did I show that? I don't know. I might have messed up in my editing. Oh yeah, here we go. The salt and pepper here, and the cumin and the thyme. So I'm going to let this cook for another 3 or 5 minutes just to let the spices kind of meld up in there. And now I'm going to add my chicken broth. Again, I am using the chicken broth. I'm not adding shredded chicken, which the original recipe calls for. You can use vegetable broth or you can use water. That's fine. Again, I don't know how it'll taste, because this is the only way that I know how it tastes, but I believe in intuitive eating, and lately I just haven't wanted any meat, but I'm not, not eating meat for ethical reasons, so I don't mind using chicken broth. And I think that it does add a much better flavor than just water would. But I think veggie broth would be pretty good too. So, like I said, this is not a vegetarian or a vegan soup, but it is meatless. So, on that note, now I've added the milk, which has been at room temperature, and the heavy cream. Now the original recipe calls for 2 cups of heavy cream. I divided it up because I didn't want it to be that creamy. You can use half and half, you can use all milk, you can use all heavy cream, and you can also use a non-dairy, like an almond milk or an oat. But again, don't know how it'll taste, but if you are dairy free, of course, feel free to substitute with a non-dairy plant-based milk. So we're going to let that simmer for another 15 minutes or so, and now I'm going to use my immersion blender. If you don't have an immersion blender, that's okay. You can, let it cool off a little bit and then put it into a regular blender. And I'm going to just blend. Now, if you want it a little chunky, you can go ahead and make it whatever consistency you like. You can keep some of the peppers in there. You could even take maybe a cup of the veggies out before you start blending, so then that way you do have some stuff floating in your soup, as you can see here. But I am not done blending. I like mine creamier. I'm just tasting for salt right now, and I decided it needs some chicken bouillon. That's my way of flavoring chicken-based soups, but you can get it natural chicken bouillon natural, which doesn't have the MSG if that's your concern, or you can just add however much salt you want and omit the bouillon. It's optional. And here we go, the final product. Like I said, used the pico de gallo. Joanna Gaines uses radishes and tortilla strips, which would be just as delicious. But there we go, shedding a little light on there. But I really hope you enjoy it. I'm serving it with a Costa Rican casado, not cansado.